I recently celebrated my 60th birthday. Time really flies, doesn't it? I remember thinking that half a century had passed since I was born, just the other day. My husband and I used to work for the same company. We got married after a workplace romance. That's a story from over 33 years ago. My husband is too proud of himself, and he has a stubborn side which he can't accept being inferior in any situation. However, back then, I felt he had a strong sense of self, and I respected him, so we got married. My colleagues opposed our marriage, but at that time I thought, he's the only one for me. So, I married him. We were blessed with children after that, and we were living happily. It was when I got pregnant that my husband told me, "I want you to quit your job and stay at home. It would be better for our child." I loved my job, so I didn't really want to quit. However, I thought about the future of my family, and began to think that my husband might be right, and staying at home could be better for our child. So, I quit my job and became a full-time homemaker. Thanks to that, I was able to witness every step of my son's growth. I was glad that I listened to my husband. I was truly grateful. It feels like it was a long time, and a short time at the same time. Children grow very fast indeed. I struggled with parenting, but my son went through puberty and went off to college. He has grown up, got a job, and left the house. Since his office was in another province, he now lives on his own. When my son used to live with us, our time was centered around him, but now that he's moved out, I find myself with a lot of free time. I considered taking up a hobby, but I'm clumsy with my hands, and I'm not good at physical activities either, so I felt like sports might not be the right choice. So, I thought, why don't I get a part-time job? I love working, so if my husband allows it, I thought I should try a part-time job. I talked to him right away, and he said, "Sure, but if you neglect the household chores, I'll ask you to quit immediately." I replied, "I'll do my best to balance both." So, I started a part-time job at the nearby supermarket. At first, it was challenging, because I wasn't used to the physical aspect of the job. There's also a promise with my husband. However, as I got used to it, I became more efficient at both work and housework. Despite it being a part-time job, it had been a long time since I worked, and my heart was becoming quite fulfilled. My life up until then had been fulfilling as well, but the satisfaction I gained from working was beyond that. However, the more satisfaction I derived from my job seemed to directly correspond to my husband's worsening mood. Then one day, "I'm tired. Why do I have to work so hard for someone like that?" He started complaining. "What's wrong?" When I asked, he responded with those mean words, "You wouldn't understand, even if I told you. After all, I'm a full-time employee, and you're just a part-timer." My husband is 2 years younger than me, and he is currently 58 years old. It must be frustrating for him to see his peers and subordinates get promoted and surpass him. Even though he holds the position of section chief, given his age, it wouldn't be strange for him to be a department head or even higher position. I'm pretty sure that the reason why he can't get promoted is because he is not good at his job, but he blamed it all on others. Every time it was time for a promotion, he was complaining. Now, there are people in his department who are the same age as our son, and although they are in different sections, they hold higher positions than my husband. He is too proud of himself, so he can't seem to accept that. I heard this from my former colleague, but people are calling him perpetual section chief. I think my husband is aware of that. Young people these days only know how to make fun of others. He has complained before. I could only respond with, "Yeah, that's right, that's right." He must be jealous of his younger bosses, who work with a smile. I think that he also can't stand it when his subordinates are more energetic and seem to be having more fun than him. And perhaps my going to work with a smile as well contributed to his jealousy, which is worsening his mood. Nevertheless, I continued to improve my position at work, and genuinely enjoyed my time there. I even bragged about it to our son, who lives out of town. He could see that I was fulfilled and he took comfort in it. He knew that my husband was a bit domineering. Especially now that it was just the two of us in the house, he was concerned that I might be under stress. I'm so happy that he grew up to such a kind son, who always cares about me. One day, another part-timer suddenly took a day off, so I had to go to work when my husband was off. When I finished work and came home, he had a sulky expression on his face and said without trying to hide that he was in a bad mood. "Hey, didn't I tell you not to slack off on household chores?" "I'm sorry. I couldn't have lunch because of you." "How could you? There were instant noodles or something, right? You should have had those. You were supposed to make lunch for me. In a normal case, you would slip out during lunch break and cook something for me." Getting a bit irritated, I retorted, "That's not normal. I can't do that." Then, my husband replied as if he was looking down on part-timers. "You're just a part-timer, so you should have some flexibility. Part-timers don't have any responsibilities, and they just need to show up. That's all." "Why do you say it like that?" I asked. "I'm a full-time employee with a title. My sense of responsibility is totally different. Your job is, well, more like child's play," he said mockingly. "That. Even if it's a part-time job, it still comes with responsibilities." I raised my voice. My husband sneered and said, "Have you forgotten something? If you don't do the housework to my satisfaction, you'll have to quit your part-time job." I couldn't argue when he brought this up. It was frustrating, but I toned it down and said, "I understand. I'll make dinner now." Feeling emboldened, my husband said, "Of course, today I couldn't have lunch because of you, so make something nice." Sure, I replied, deciding to let it slide. It seems my husband looks down on part-time jobs. I couldn't stand him for that. Even though it was just a part-time job, I put in my best effort at my job. I had even taken on managerial tasks. I am in charge of creating schedules, and I couldn't leave the shift empty, so I went to work today. However, even if I tell my husband about it, he would just say that it's just a part-time job after all. He's looking down on me. Even though we're a married couple. The love towards my husband quickly cooled. Before we got married, my husband wasn't like this. But recently, he's been complaining all the time. And making condescending remarks about me. And every day, he's been getting more and more irritated. It's not pleasant to watch. One day, I received a message from a former colleague from the time when my husband and I worked at the same company. She asked if I could spare some time, so I decided to go for lunch with her on my day off from the part-time job. "Hey, how's your husband been at home lately?" "It's the same as always. I think I've mentioned it before, but he's got that domineering attitude, haha." "I see. You started a part-time job, right?" "Yes, I did because my son got a job and moved out." "But how do you know?" "Your husband has been making fun of your part-time job at work. He's been telling the juniors and colleagues that, even though you're just a part-timer, you act all high and mighty like it's a real job. He even said that you're a failure as a housewife, since you can't do housework properly. He thinks you're the kind of wife that should be dumped." I was taken aback. That alone would be bad enough, but he also said that because he married someone like you, he can't get promoted. What? I couldn't believe that my husband was saying such things at work. I was upset, and that night, I confronted him with the story I had heard from my former colleague. That's when my husband became enraged. He knocked everything off the table onto the floor kicked the table and chairs, and started acting out. I was scared by that sight, and from then on, I began living every day in fear, trying not to upset him. I must have been under a lot of mental stress. While at work, I started getting headaches when standing, and found myself sitting more often. And then, I collapsed at work. I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and the doctor told me that the cause was stress and overwork. The doctor said, "I think it's probably due to an imbalance of body and mind, caused by both mental and physical stress. Do you have an idea of what's making you stressed?" Although I thought it was probably because of my husband, I only replied, "Maybe I was tired from working." I fell asleep while getting in 4 on the hospital bed. In the evening when I woke up, my husband was standing by the bed. While I was surprised, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well." He responded gruffly, "Hurry up and come home." I was taken aback and said, "Come home? The doctor told me to rest at the hospital for today." He asked, "Are you sick?" I replied, "They said it's stress and overwork." He sarcastically said, "Stress and overwork from a part-time job? That's funny. Anyway, I'm hospitalized today, so please take care of things at home," I pleaded. He said, "That's not what we agreed on. We agreed that you would handle both household chores and your part-time job, right?" I explained, "You can see that I can't do it today. I'm sorry, but please understand." When I said that, my husband didn't say anything, and deliberately closed the hospital room door loudly as he left. It was a large room, but I was the only one there that day, so I didn't inconvenience anyone, which was a relief. However, even at a time like this, he prioritizes himself. And he says such things at the hospital. I spent that day at the hospital, and was discharged the next day. When I returned home, there were divorce papers, which my husband has already signed on it. I was delighted to see the divorce papers. Finally, I'll be free from him. That's when my husband called me. He said in a sarcastic and condescending tone, "Did you see the papers? You'd be in trouble if I divorced you, right? You have the audacity to talk back to me about getting stressed from just a part-time job when you are living off me. If you apologize and beg me, I might consider forgiving you this time. What will you do?" I replied with joy, "Let's get a divorce." In a panic, my husband said, "Huh? What are you talking about? You won't be able to support yourself, just with a part-time job. What can you do on your own?" I replied, "It's fine, you can keep making fun of the part-time job." He then said, "I can imagine you apologizing and begging me already, you know? I'll be back in about 2 hours, so reflect on it. Got it?" He hung up unilaterally. I signed the divorce papers that my husband had prepared for me. Then, I packed my valuables and the essentials into a carry-on suitcase and left the house. In the evening, he called me again. "Hey! Why aren't you here? I don't see the divorce papers here either. What's going on? I told you that I was going to accept a divorce. Right after you called me, I submitted the divorce papers. A friend of mine rushed over and signed as a witness. Thanks to you filling it out properly, it was accepted." "Thank you," I replied with oozing joy. "What are you talking about? You'll be in trouble if I divorce you," he exclaimed. "I wouldn't say that," I responded. "Why not? Do you think you can live on your own with just a part-time job? Don't underestimate society," he retorted. "I'm not a part-timer anymore," I said. "What? You quit your job? In that case, you won't be able to survive," he exclaimed. "What are you misunderstanding? I'm becoming a full-time employee." "Huh? Actually, there had been talk of me getting a full-time job before my health took a hit. I'll be the area manager at the headquarters, I explained. Our area manager was retiring, and I had been recommended to replace her. In my area, the store manager is around the same age as me, and many of the employees are of a relatively older age group. So, we can understand each other's feelings easily. This was one of the reasons why people recommended me. People with extensive experience as homemakers tend to have a good grasp of sales performance. And most importantly, they are competent in their work. The previous area manager supported me for these reasons. Actually, when I was working for the same company as my husband, there was talk of me becoming a section chief. However, when my husband found out about it, he told me to quit the company. I suppose he couldn't tolerate having his wife as his boss. And we'll make sure to handle the property division properly. Also, just so you know, the source of my stress isn't work, it's you. If you make a fuss, I have a doctor's note, so I can take you to court and even claim compensation. With that, I unilaterally hung up the phone. Afterward, I also talked to my son about it. My son had been encouraging me to get a divorce, so he said, "That's great," and welcomed me into his home. During the property division discussion, I politely said, "Thank you for parting ways." In response, my ex-husband shouted again, "Are you kidding me? We made a contract that you do my housework." A contract? What are you talking about? We were married, you know, we were supposed to be equal. You always look down on people, but you're actually the one who is looked down upon the most by people around you, I retorted. What did you say? Are you getting cocky? This was the moment I decided to let out everything I had been thinking. I heard from people from your company, but they said you're really incapable at your job, and you are just a figurehead section chief. Your company probably gave you a section chief position because they thought they needed to give you some sort of position, given your age. You're a laughingstock, making disparaging remarks about all kinds of people, without regard for your own position. You're completely blind to your own actions. I couldn't stand being with someone like you anymore, which is why I divorced you. As for the property division, I'll take half of the savings and 2/3 of your retirement money. You can keep the house, and when we calculate it based on the worth of the house, that's roughly half, I explained. You've got to be kidding. What am I supposed to do now? He yelled. I just said, I don't care. At that moment, my ex-husband froze and couldn't say a word. Afterward, he tried to contact me multiple times, but I ignored him. It seems like he talked about the divorce at his workplace, but he distorted the story, making it seem like I was entirely at fault. As a result, my ex-husband ended up completely isolated at work. He eventually realized the situation, but it was too late. He was mentally overwhelmed and made mistakes repeatedly. Consequently, he even lost his position as a figurehead section chief. He left the company voluntarily due to his wounded pride, probably thinking that I'd take away 2/3 of his retirement pay anyway. But my ex-husband didn't understand reality. Finding a new job at the age of 58 is incredibly challenging, especially when you're not skilled at your work. He ended up getting a part-time job, which he made fun of so much. He tried to get help from our son once, but our son shut him down, and after that, he never contacted my son. I started working at the company's headquarters. I never thought I'd become a full-time employee at my age. To be honest, it's been a bit bewildering, but I'm determined to work hard for the company. With my son's support, I aim to become a super senior employee. Working feels great, doesn't it?